Hello and welcome to the pre-college fair workshop. The artist is entrepreneur, college and career options in the visual and performing arts. My name is Andrew Lowy. I'm the Associate Director of Fine Arts Admissions at Webster University. I'm joined by three colleagues that are going to present this session with me. Amy Golden from College Options in the Performing Arts, Laura Young from the UCLA School of Arts and Architecture, and Barry Raffel from the College Options in the Performing Arts, and also a professional dancer in the New York City area. So what we're going to do today is kind of walk you through what it's like to be a career in the fine and performing arts and what that entails. We understand that parents do have many questions about what this looks like, how a career works, how it may be different from other careers that you might be more familiar with. We're here to answer all those questions and more. So we're going to go through some of this information, and then at the end we'll have a live Q&A session to follow up on any questions that you have. So with that, I'm going to have Laura from UCLA get us started.
All right, everybody. So something that we all wanted to kind of start off on was everything that we hear about, we want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is all of the horrible things that we hear about art school and working in the arts. So this is what we frequently hear in the media, that being an artist is just goofing off all the time. It's not a real job. If you start on the path, it's a one-way ticket to nowhere. And the only way to make money is to be famous. And if you aren't famous, then it is straight to your parents' basement where you're going to wear a black, have holes in your socks, and eat ramen for all eternity. There's absolutely no in between. And we've all heard this. And so how are regular people supposed to make a living in an arts career? We've all seen those lists where arts majors are up on worst college majors, worst return on investment lists. So let's talk about how artists make money, because contrary to popular belief, artists care a lot about making money. They just want to go about it in their own way. Many artists do actually work 9 to 5, 40-hour weeks, but we never get to hear about them because many artists, we usually get to hear about the people who don't. And freelance work gets portrayed generally as unpredictable, quote unquote. But for many artists, having more freedom over how they spend their work lives is how they choose to work. Because being able to manage their schedules and priorities around optimizing their creativity is paramount. And because they choose to work this way, their earnings become impressively difficult to track.
So a freelance life in the arts is often not just one job that pays all the bills, and it varies hugely from person to person. While some of the money and jobs may come from their arts field, many freelance artists balance their lives with work that is very meaningful to them. Sometimes it's connected to what they do as an artist, and sometimes it fulfills some other interest or talent that they have. This keeps their finances consistent. If they feel like they have a year where they're not having as much work in their artistic field, they're not as worried about how they're making ends meet. They start to figure this out usually as they begin working professionally, understanding where their interests are, and often it will come out of something that they have been doing. Those who sew really, really well might become the costume designers or makeup artists. Some people teach. Some people figure out other ways to stay flexible in the field. They become physical therapists or occupational therapists. But the main thing is that they find something where the hours are very flexible and they can control that. So their priority of performing, rehearsing, getting to class remains something that they're able to do. There are many who decide to take on work that is not particularly meaningful to them so that it doesn't take their focus away from what they really want to be doing. They might wait tables or do Uber driving, whatever it is, just so they can leave it at the door and keep their mind focused on their performing or artistic career. Some create their own consistent work. They might run or manage a small theater or be the choreographer, but usually there is something that's giving them some financial freedom in order to do that. And many freelance artists do not need another job, and they work consistently as artists and make enough money to do so, and get hired again and again by the same people or recommended by others, and keep it moving, and that's how they do it.
So I'd actually like to tell you about a friend of mine who is a professional dancer and choreographer. So this is kind of a picture of one of the many stories that all of us know. So my dancer friend, she makes about $75,000 a year as a professional dancer. She choreographs and she dances for TV and film. And then she's also the head of corporate communications for an aerospace engineering firm and makes about $150,000 a year doing that. So these might seem like two really different jobs, but if you talk to my friend, she sees it as all one and the same because her communications job allows her the financial flexibility to be choosy about her dance projects. So all of us here on the panel can tell you so many stories, just like this one. These are not the ones that are making it into the news, clearly, because these "you'll never make money as an artist" lists aren't telling the whole story.
So let's talk about the actual hiring process that all of these artists are going through, no matter what they're doing to keep their income viable for them. In the performing arts, getting hired varies greatly across each of the arts. When we're looking at performers who are in theater and music, they have to know how to find the jobs that are available. And maybe they have to know how to find the jobs that are not available yet, but are going to become available. They have to get appointments to be seen. Even if somebody knows them, they still have to audition. It's all about the audition for getting a role or walking into an open call. Some actors, musical theater and straight theater, television, film, they work on getting an agent, someone who will represent them. And if this is a good agent, that person has connections throughout the industry and will connect them to those very auditions that they're looking for, the ones that are posted and maybe the ones that have not yet been posted. We can look at the technology-based careers, such as people who are going into the music industry, audio engineering, music production, careers in theater technology, such as our stage managers, our lighting designers. They need to build a reputation and do work that is seen in other areas by other people. They need to have a current portfolio of the best aspects of that work, and they might even be asked to do a sample of their work for a prospective employer. For dance, and really Barry should be talking about this, but I got chosen to do. In dance, depending on the kind of work you do, in the world of commercial dance, for instance, auditions are imperative. We're talking about people who are in musical theater, dancing at theme parks, on cruises, which will be coming back in the future. We believe they will. Big name tours, working as a backup dancer, commercial dancers on TV, in large world-class ballet companies. They're all going to be doing auditions. But as Barry has so kindly pointed out to me, in some cases in the modern dance world, which is a smaller dance world, a small company may already know some dancers, and a choreographer or company director might say, this is the right person for that role, come do the role, and that audition might not have to be there. There are things that can be out of your control once you go into that audition. And one thing that we know is that type is very important, especially in theater. Are you the right type for what the casting or director or music director is looking for or is listening for? Is your type going to fit in visually with what the other actors are looking like on the stage? And that is a very subjective question and a very subjective answer, and may not have much to do with the actual talent level of what a person's got to show. Sometimes things that are out of your control could be the timing of a production. Does that fit into your time schedule? Do you fit into its time schedule? There may be other contractual demands that work or do not work for a particular production company, for a particular actor. And then, of course, we want to make sure that you don't become one of those hard to work with reputation actors that are out there. And for more on that, I recommend that you watch the movie Tootsie and see about being a hard to play actor. We need to look at perseverance as well. An actor or anyone else in this area who's looking at getting a job has to be on top of everything that's happened in the industry. They have to do daily research. They have to keep track of every audition possibility and every audition they go to. People are making tremendous use of social media more than ever before, and I don't think that that is because of COVID. It's happened before COVID, and I think it's going to continue after people are out of quarantine and theater is back up and running. People have to be ready for any audition opportunity at any time, especially in theater and musical theater. They need to have an up-to-date audition reel, also something that was happening before COVID and will be happening after COVID. And that is a lot of the auditioning is happening by people sending in either reels or specific pieces for a specific production that they have been doing self-tapes in their living room or dining room or standing in front of a blank screen and doing a self-tape of what's being expected of them. So technology and understanding and being able to use technologies become very, very much in the forefront. We also need to look at the entrepreneurial side that Barry and Laura have both been talking about, being able to look at not only your art, but the life skills of money and income and hopefully saving as well as spending to see if your art is bringing you enough to live on. That's the idea of being entrepreneurial, to make that money so that you can continue with the things that you love to do. And that may include finding an additional income stream if the art that you're doing is not bringing enough. Being an entrepreneur means being one's own manager. Even if you have a manager or an agent, you need to be the one overseeing that aspect of your life so that you don't really put your life into the hands of someone else, but you maintain understanding of what's going on in your life artistically, financially, and socially. And we're going to move to the next slide.
So one thing that I think a lot of people in this industry find surprising is that networking is in fact key when it comes to, understanding the hiring process and going inside the hiring process. Networking is really is critically important. The relationships that you cultivate and that you build, those will lead oftentimes to your next job. The reason for this is quite simple. Producers talk to other producers. Casting agents talk to other casting agents. Directors talk to other directors. This is the world they live in, and they have these collaboration with each other, and they talk to each other on a regular basis. So the comment about if word gets around that you're difficult to work with, or if there's problems, that's something that the word will travel fast in that. So it's surprisingly, this is like a lot of other industries where that networking is key, element is really quite important. I would say that what was touched on before is also very accurate. One thing as an artist that you need to do is that you need to establish this reputation that you show up on time, you're prepared, you do good work, and you're not a pain in the rear. If you do those things and you establish that reputation, you will have a much easier time of being successful in this industry. And I do want to have Barry, who is living this life in this world every day, to comment on that a little further and give us a little more perspective.
So really you begin to work on your network from the time you begin studying, and everyone that you have come across is already part of that. These industries are generally very small and close-knit, so often there is quite a bit of mentoring and sharing of network. How gracious you are in receiving that and often returning that can help you work again and again with the same people or be recommended, as Andrew pointed out. Your peers in college, in classes, in your first performances often will lead to your first employment, and sometimes that will be very long term. So they're a great source of work. It's not always somebody who is already way ahead of you in the industry. And also your peers can help you find a lot of the resources you might need, help you when you are first hired and trying to figure out your contracts or insurance or whatever other things you might need to know. Of course, online networking is, the name of the game right now, but that's also to find out what's happening in your industry, as well as putting yourself forward, staying in public view. That being said, what you do, as Andrew pointed out, when you are in a job, your work ethic, your collaboration skills, that is going to give you the ability to continue building on every bridge that you have already started. And that network keeps growing and keeps you employed.
So we're going to talk a little bit about contracts. The existence of a contract depends on whether the show or the production that you're in or that you're part of is a union production in a union location or not. So we're really talking a lot about the union experience. Major performance spaces in this country and our Broadway-sized theaters tend to be union houses and therefore only employ union members. Other venues, coffee houses, open mic locations, even restaurants, which used to be union houses, so to speak, sometimes are not these days. And just as a clarification, I myself have been an entertainment union member since I was 13 years old. So I personally have seen various pros and cons pop up in this world of unions. So some of the pros of being a union member. One, in most cases, in order to be admitted into the union, you have to demonstrate certain expertise and experience already. So you have to get that expertise and experience before you're even eligible. Another pro of being a union is that the contract spells out union standards in things such as access to benefits like health insurance and workman's compensation. And of course, you have standardized salaries. A contract through a union lays out specific and expectations of what you're going to do in the context of the production. Are you going to be a lead player, an ensemble player? Are you going to move a chair in the scene on stage during the production? That all gets covered by the union. We also have rules that apply to how much time you're allowed to rehearse, where you will, what conditions you'll be under. There are endless details that are considered by the union that are stuck into a contract that is a union contract. You also have support from union leaders globally or nationally in your specific field, and a union representative on site. One of your fellow cast members will be a union representative in your specific production, or you'll be able to have access to one if issues that seem questionable to you. Now, there are also some cons to being a union member. One is that you have to work within the union rules. You can sometimes work in union and sometimes not work in union. It's possible that you wouldn't be allowed to perform somewhere that isn't a union house unless you actually get permission from the union, specifically in writing, permission from the union to perform at your local talent show in the park. So while options for where you can work are highly professional, they may in some ways also limit you and keep you from getting a wider range of experience and connections. Another issue is that if your union goes on strike, you have to strike too. Another aspect of unions is that union dues need to be paid year-round, whether you're working or not. If you are working in a show, they will take it automatically out of your paycheck. When you're not working, you'll get a bill. Union dues are ongoing. And as a union member, you're competing for roles against seasoned professionals who are not only highly trained and experienced performers, they're also very well connected to the agents, the directors, the music directors, and other individuals who are on the inside of the casting industry. So that goes back to that networking experience. So what if you're not in a union? Some pros to not being in a union are that you can work in a place that's not a union house. And the fact is that there are more non-union houses these days than there are union locations. Another pro is that even though the salaries in the union are going to be higher, you would have a little more leeway in negotiating a salary and other aspects if the company that you're planning to work for and that's planning to hire you is open to that kind of negotiation. In the union, the salary is the salary, and you really can't change that. In a non-union situation, you can play around with that and be more negotiating if that's your style. You may want to work for a certain director. You may want to play in a certain house. You may want to play a certain role, and you might be willing to take less money for the opportunity to do that, which the union would never allow you to do. So, one of the other things that we talk about in the cons to being in a union is that we don't have any of those set standards and expectations of things such as workplace safety, which has really come into play these days with safety issues and health issues in terms of why theaters are closed. We definitely don't have any salary specifics, so a company can make its own salary and could pay you $40 a show or $100 a show. More or less, it's completely up to the company, and you are kind of stuck to whatever contract they might give you. And then you could be asked to do pretty much anything that the company wants to do in the production. And I know, Barry, you've had this kind of experience in your working life. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. Sure. I had a performance in St. John the Divine with a dance company. I had stepped in for somebody who had been injured, had to learn everything very quickly. And there was a beautiful set design of these industrial blocks of ice as the background, but also in these little kind of open coffins down the aisle. And the choreographer said, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if we were all just laying on the blocks of ice as the audience comes in and sits down before the show?" And I thought, no, that is not something I'm willing to do. But of course, non-union, no contract. I did just say no, and that happened to work. But it's best, even in non-union, to have some kind of agreement, even if it is written on a napkin between you and the person hiring you, and to be thinking about what aspects you need to understand. What floor am I going to be working on? What temperature, outside or inside? Nudity, your image, especially now with a lot of photos online. Do you own that? Do you get to take that with you? Transportation, not just the flight, but to and from airport. So there's a lot of aspects to consider and to negotiate for yourself. And it really helps to be quite savvy and also to organize that beforehand, not to wait until the emergency happens or the injury happens. So especially this year with COVID, there was a lot of what's called force majeure, where it's an emergency, people are going to cancel, and then there has to be a lot of determining of who gets paid, when, how, why, etc.
So I just wanted to follow up briefly on something that was mentioned earlier about, being entrepreneurial. And the reason we mentioned this is because this can be the key in a lot of ways to helping have a successful career in the arts. We're going to talk about double majors in a little bit, or even possibly a minor. The question about a minor comes up quite a bit. And my recommendation would be is to you might find a minor in entrepreneurship, or at least take classes in entrepreneurship. That can be very, very beneficial. So as you can see, this is what most entrepreneurship programs will teach you: how to market yourself, the basics of accounting and finance, contracts, which we just talked about. All of these things are very, very important. So I really like the idea of somebody who is majoring in the fine and performing arts, if they have the opportunity to take classes in entrepreneurship. Because as you can see there at the bottom, every artist needs to think of themselves as an entrepreneur. So as you're looking to kind of navigate this and plot out the best way forward and not missing on any opportunities during the college experience, I like the idea of entrepreneurship classes as something to integrate into the academic program there.
So these are some personality traits and personality questions that every artist really needs to ask of themselves, and not just once, over and over again. Do they find joy in the artistic process? If there's no joy, maybe it's not the right place for them to be. Do they want to be problem solving? Because all of doing the arts really is problem solving. Creativity is about asking questions. Why does the world work the way it does? Why do people function the way they do? Why do people feel the way they do? And how do we express how we as humans feel? Are artists interested in developing their talent? Because talent all by itself is just talent, and it doesn't approach artistry until it's been developed and worked on and considered and maybe thrown out and started over again. Can they learn and grow from constructive feedback? Students have already been gotten another kind of feedback that we may call critiques or criticism, and that is not going to stop because they become a professional. So they need to know that that's coming their way, and they need to start to learn to figure out how much of it is valuable and how much of it is just sour grapes from people who really aren't as good as they are. Can they maintain discipline and focus? And can they plan, execute, finish a project? When they go into just the working world, but the artistic world, they are going to be working on projects, whether it's a sculpture or a painting or finding a role or becoming a Shakespearean actor. And the start, the middle, and the finish is important, both in the working world where they can say, yes, I can do that project. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how long I'm going to need to do it. And finally be able to say, yes, it's done. And then move on to their next project and know when a project is finished and know when a project needs some time to breathe before you can finish. I love this question. Do you love to tell stories that resonate with people? You know, Picasso said, there is only one way to see things until someone shows us how to look at them with different eyes. And that's where our artists come in, telling the stories, retelling the stories, telling the stories of life in different ways that resonate with humans. That's kind of what makes us different from the other animals. Art is what makes us different from other animals. And so the next slide that we have is a simple but clear graphic of an artist's pie of success. Art infuse people's lives and show us that there's more to success than a straight divide between a job and a salary. The poet Rilke said, if when you wake up in the morning you can think of nothing but writing, then you are a writer. Substitute singing, acting, playing, dancing, and those words ring just as true. People who pursue a career in the arts are always working toward a balance between their artistic nature and how the world works. And the world works not in those two halves, but in all different pieces of this lovely blue pie.
So we've been speaking a lot about what it is like to work in the arts, and Andrew mentioned earlier about double majoring, and there is some connection between what students decide to do and how they plan their educational lives during undergrad that is related to what they're going to do when in college. So we want to ask everybody here to think about how many people do you know who work in a direct area that they majored in. So for example, I studied electrical engineering in college and now I am an electrical engineer. Not so many if you look across all of the people that are in the working world, maybe in engineering, maybe in nursing, but if you kind of expand beyond that, it's a real mixed bag. And at this point, people are changing jobs a lot more than they used to, usually 10 to 15 times between ages 18 through 50, with the most movement happening between the ages of 18 to 24. People are changing jobs on average 5.7 times in that time period. So arts degrees historically have focused on developing lifelong learning skills and resiliency. So are in a lot of ways classical liberal arts programs, but with a particular professional specialization in creative inquiry and context. So how that relates to degrees. So how this breaks down is a BA, a Bachelor of Arts, or a Bachelor of Science, a BS. You're going to find about a 50-50 split between the coursework in the liberal arts and coursework in arts studio. For a BFA, Bachelor of Fine Arts, or a BM, Bachelor of Music, there is more coursework in the arts, around a 60-40, sometimes up to a 70-30 distribution, with the majority of classes being in arts studio. So we always get this question, what type of degree is better? And really, one type of degree isn't necessarily better than the other. And there are some cases where BA or BS programs, they're going to be on par with BFA or BM programs in terms of rigor. If you are a student who has a more focused career goal, so transportation design, for instance, or if you are a highly skilled musician or a performer intending on teaching at a college level. So it's a minority of students, but there are students who know when they're 17 that they want to go and teach at a university level and perform at a very high level. A BFA in transportation design or a Bachelor of Music or a Bachelor of Fine Arts in those areas are going to carry a little bit more weight and be more appropriate. For the majority of students, though, a BA versus a BFA is not going to make or break your career. If students have the skills for the job, then that is going to be the most important thing.
So let's talk about this idea of double majoring, because far and away, this is a question we get quite a bit for those looking at colleges and going through the college search process, is the idea of, should I double major? And there's a few things that need to be considered. First of all, you're going to find a wide variety of how colleges approach double major. Some are really going to be open to it, and they're going to actively encourage it, and they might even have it set up to where it's actually easy and possible to double major and have a 4-year curriculum plan already in place for that. On the other end of the spectrum, you are going to find those schools where they really do not want you to double major and may go as far as saying that you can't double major, or you can't really take classes in other areas because whatever obligation you have, academic or otherwise, in your within your program, that's going to take priority over everything else. So that's definitely a question you want to ask at colleges. Some colleges will be very open to it, others not so much. But more importantly, I think, as a student, they need to ask themselves, why are they considering double majoring? I mean, is it just because they can tell the obnoxious relative at the Thanksgiving table to chill out, and that they're getting a major in business or computer science, and so to relax, or is it because they have a genuine interest in the other subject area? I think that is key. I talked a little bit about, the idea of doing entrepreneurship. We also get asked quite a bit about business. Don't double major in business just because you feel like you have to, or you need something to fall back on, right? You should only double major in that area if you have a genuine interest in business or in psychology or whatever it is. If you don't have a genuine interest in any other area, I wouldn't do that. I would stick with what's going to get you excited about getting to class for the next 4 years and getting there on time and being successful while you're in class. So try not to get kind of caught, in that trap there. I've also heard some artists and faculty members say, well, if you do this because you want something to fall back on, you're going to fall back on it. And you can kind of have that debate in terms of how much sense, that makes, versus just doing whatever it takes to be successful. But those are the questions you should ask. You should also ask how long it will take to double major. Some colleges may begrudgingly let you do it, but they're going to tell you it's going to take you 7 years, and you got to complete one program first. And then finally, a lot of students regarding double major ask about teaching certification. Well, okay, I can always be an art teacher, always could be a music teacher or a theater teacher. That's often a double major at most colleges because you have to get certified in that specific content area. And again, you have to like the idea of being a teacher, not just something to fall back on. If you're going to be a music education major, you need to ask yourself, do I like the idea of standing in front of a 6th grade band room and trying to spend most of the hour trying to get them to play a scale? And then I'm going to do that 4 times, 5 times over in the same day. If you like that and you can do that and you have the temperament for that, that is great. It takes a special person to be a teacher, and we would love to have you do that. But again, these are kinds of I would say, the critical questions that you need to ask when considering a double major. And in conclusion here, I think, we need to talk about kind of what success looks like. And we've talked about this before in some, in some previous slides. And I think this slide does a really good job. It's very simple, but it's also very poignant in my opinion. We think it looks like a straight line, always heading upward, but with a lot of things and a lot of things in life and a lot of jobs in life, it can take detours, and sometimes you go backwards and sometimes you get off track and you need to get back, on track. But as you can see, a lot of times the end result, is the same. So I often challenge students and parents to realize that it is going to look different. One of the ways to explain this is a career in the fine arts, especially, in some cases, it's not like other fields. It's not like, say, accounting or nursing. I mean, we kind of know what that educational and career path looks like in those industries. But the fine arts world is often different from that, and that's fine. They are different industries. But I do think it's important to understand that in a lot of cases, the end result can be the same. It can be different for a number of people, and to understand it's not this linear process that we often think it is. And Laura, I think you also might have had some perspective on this as well. So if you want to wrap us up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this visual here.
Trying to unmute here. Well, I mean, I really like this slide, kind of based off of a discussion that it reminds me of a discussion of somebody who worked at, his name is Joe Rohde, and he worked at Walt Disney Imagineering for a really long time and is arguably the most famous kind of high profile Imagineer, and he recently retired. But I had the privilege of being able to hang out with him and talk to him a bunch of times. And he deals with theme park development. And he went to a liberal arts school, and he said, I love to hire a mix of people from art school and from liberal arts programs. And what I've noticed is that usually people from, and the arts does this as well, where he said sometimes the people with more specialized training that's a little bit more focused, their trajectory will kind of go upwards at the beginning of their career in a straight line, and then it sometimes plateaus. But with the liberal arts students, what I've really noticed is that they kind of go backwards and forwards, and they kind of spin around a little bit, and it goes up and down and all over the place, but it still keeps moving upwards, and it keeps going that way. And he said, so I really need a balance of those two kinds of people on my teams always, because, for instance, I need to be able to say, hey, we're going to be developing this jungle over here that is De Chirico-esque. And I need my team to know what that means. And if they've been in a specific area that hasn't really had a broad art history lesson, they're not going to know what that means. But I find that my liberal arts students understand that more. So again, like within the working world, there are going to be people who really need specifics, and there are people who are going to need a broader set of knowledge, and everybody really comes through. But that interplay between everybody bringing their experiences together, this is kind of what's going to happen to you. And I don't think that all of these wiggly lines are exclusive to the arts either. I think this is just the way that it is now. We're recording this during a pandemic, and people have had to pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot and pivot again. And it's really uncomfortable. But if you practice that, then it's a little bit easier. I hope it is. So you want to bring us home, Andrew?
Absolutely. I want to thank you for taking the time to view this recording and process this information. We hope this has led to some questions, and what we're going to move into now is a live Q&A session with all of the participants. But we did want to put up our contact information. Please reach out to us. We would be happy to have an individual conversation with you about anything that was covered here, and offer you even further insight into your specific situation. So we put the contact information up there for a reason, because we want you to reach out for us. But in the meantime, we're going to move into the live Q&A. Thanks.